All right, you want the lowdown on this Nigel Farage bloke. Buckle up, Buttercup, because this limey dastard's done it all. From trading medals to pissing off the entire EU, the dude's a walk-in, talking shitstorm of a career. You're our Farage encyclopedia for this deep dive. Hit us with the highlights. What's this dude's deal?
Well, Farage is this British politician.
Oh, here we go.
Super loud, super right-wing, huge hard-on for getting the UK out of the European Union. And guess what? The crazy son of a bitch actually pulled it off.
So the guy was basically the poster child for Brexit.
You got it.
This is going to be good.
Led the charge, pissed off a whole bunch of people, but also rallied a shitload of support, became a fucking rock star to some, a total asshat to others.
All right, so we've got a mountain of info on this Brexit bollock stir, from his Wikipedia page to a whole bunch of articles. Let's cut the crap. Was Farage just a loudmouth, or did he actually change the game?
It's more nuanced than that. Farage is like that bloke at the pub who's always got an opinion, but somehow he ended up leading the charge to yank the UK out of the EU. Love him or hate him, you can't deny he's a major figure in British politics.
So the bloke went from trading medals to trading insults in the European Parliament.
Oh, yeah?
That's a hell of a career change.
Yeah.
What's the deal with his early days? Was he always this much of a rabble-rouser?
Well, he was a bit of a political geek even in his school days, joining the Conservative Party early on. But get this, he actually voted Green in '89 because they were the Eurosceptics back then.
That's mental.
Yeah.
I guess even back then, the dude had a hard-on for sticking it to the establishment.
Yep.
What happened next?
Exactly. Then he bailed on the Conservatives in '92 when they signed the Maastricht Treaty, which basically laid the groundwork for the EU as we know it. He felt betrayed, and that's when he went full-on Eurosceptic.
So that's where UKIP comes in, right?
Yep, he was a founding member in '93. They were seen as a fringe party for a long time, but Farage managed to build them up and give a voice to a lot of Brits who felt unheard.
And he took that voice straight to the European Parliament, becoming an MEP in '99. I read about this Herman Van Rompuy guy. Sounds like Farage ripped him a new one? What was that all about?
Oh, that was a classic Farage moment.
Oh, I love it already.
Van Rompuy was the president of the European Council, and in a speech, Farage said he had the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. Not exactly diplomatic language.
What did the EU do? Kick him out?
They tried to reprimand him, even docked his pay for 10 days, but it only made Farage more popular with his supporters. He played the victim card brilliantly.
The bloke knew how to work a crowd, that's for sure. Speaking of crowds, what's this? I'm reading about him getting a milkshake chucked at him.
This wasn't your typical pub brawl. It was during the 2019 European Parliament election campaign, and some bloke who was pissed off about Brexit decided to express his displeasure with a milkshake to the face. Happened more than once, actually.
Damn. Sounds like campaigning with Farage was a messy business. But let's get back to Brexit. How did he go from being this MEP, who everyone laughed at, to the face of a movement that actually succeeded?
Well, UKIP started gaining traction in the early 2010s, capitalizing on public anxieties about immigration and the perceived loss of British sovereignty to the EU. Farage was a gifted communicator, connecting with people who felt ignored by the mainstream parties.
He was the original straight-talking politician.
Yeah, that was his image. Whether he was actually telling the truth or just bullshitting is another matter.
He definitely knew how to play the media game, that's for sure. So tell me about this Breaking Point poster. Seems like that caused the right shitstorm.
Yes, that was one of the most controversial moments of the Brexit campaign. The poster showed a queue of migrants trying to enter Europe and was seen by many as exploiting fears about immigration.
I bet that pissed a lot of people off.
It did. Even some Leave supporters thought it went too far. But it got people talking about immigration, which is what Farage wanted.
So the referendum happens,
Right.
Leave wins, and Farage is on top of the world. What happened next?
He resigned as UKIP leader, saying he wanted his life back. But he didn't stay quiet for long.
Of course not. What did he do next?
He did something almost as dramatic. He founded the Brexit Party. This was in 2019, and it was basically a vehicle for those who felt betrayed by the slow pace of Brexit negotiations.
So Farage was back in the game, stirring the pot once again.
You could say that. The Brexit Party actually won the most seats in the 2019 European Parliament elections, which was a huge slap in the face to the establishment.
That's gotta sting. So what happened with the Brexit Party? Did they take over and kick everyone out?
Not quite. The party fizzled out after Brexit actually happened in 2020, and Farage went on to do other things like become a commentator on Fox News.
Wait, Fox News, the American news channel.
Yeah, that one. Seems Farage found a kindred spirit in Donald Trump.
No surprises there. So Farage hangs up his political hat and goes to America to pal around with Trump. Is that the end of the story?
Nope, there's more. In 2021, the Brexit Party was rebranded as Reform UK, and Farage became its honorary president.
Honorary president. Sounds like a fancy title for sitting on your arse and doing nothing.
Well, that's what everyone thought until 2024 rolled around.
Oof, this is where it gets interesting. I'm seeing something about him running for parliament again. Tell me more.
Farage couldn't resist the lure of the political arena. He decided to run for the Clacton constituency in the 2024 general election, and this time he actually won.
The comeback kid. So after all this time, Farage finally gets to be an MP. What's he been up to since then?
Well, he's been making a name for himself in Parliament, as you might expect. He's been a vocal critic of the Labour government, particularly on issues like immigration and the riots that happened earlier this year.
Sounds like Farage is back to his old tricks, stirring up trouble wherever he goes. But wait a minute, I'm seeing something about a banking scandal. What's that all about?
Ah, yes, that was quite a saga. Turns out Farage had his account closed by the private bank accounts, and he claimed it was because of his political views.
Hold on, you're telling me a bank can just shut down your account because they don't like your politics? That's some fucked up bullshit.
It certainly caused a lot of controversy. Farage made a big fuss about it, claiming he was being discriminated against for being a Brexiteer.
Did he have any proof?
Well, it turned out that Coutts did have some concerns about his political views, but they also claimed he didn't meet their eligibility criteria, like having £1 million in his account.
So was it a political hit job or just a bank being a bunch of wankers?
It's hard to say for sure. The CEO of Coutts ended up resigning over the whole mess, so it definitely damaged the bank's reputation.
I can imagine. This Farage bloke seems to attract drama wherever he goes. So after all this, is he still an MP?
He is. And there are rumors that he might even have bigger ambition.
Like what, Prime Minister Farage? Don't even joke about that.
Hey, stranger things have happened. Remember, this is the guy who everyone laughed at, and he ended up changing the course of British history.
All right, I get it. Never underestimate the power of a loud mouth with a grudge. So what else have we got on this bloke? Surely there's more to his story than just Brexit and banking scandals.
Well, he's had a rather colorful personal life, including 2 marriages and a few scrapes with the law.
Ooh, juicy. Let's spill the tea. First, tell me about the wives. 2 marriages, you say?
His first marriage was to an Irish nurse named Green Hayes, and they had 2 kids together. They divorced in '97, and then in '99, he married Kirsten Mayer, who's German. They also have 2 kids.
And he married a German woman, but he hates the EU.
That's a bit hypocritical, isn't it?
Well, Farage has always maintained that he's not anti-European, just anti-EU. He said his wife has proved that he doesn't have anything against Germans.
I guess that makes sense. So what happened with the second marriage? Did they live happily ever after?
Not quite. They separated in 2017, and Farage has since been linked to other women.
The bloke's a bit of a ladies' man, then. I'm starting to see why they call him Marmite. You either love him or hate him. He certainly has a polarizing personality. But let's move on to his brushes with the law.
Oh yeah, I remember reading something about him getting hit by a car. What was that all about?
That was back in '85 after a night out. He was pretty badly injured, nearly lost his leg.
Ouch. That's got to be traumatic.
It was. He spent months in casts, but thankfully he made a full recovery.
So it wasn't just the plane crash that messed him up. Speaking of which, what's the deal with that? He nearly died in a plane crash, right?
It was a close call, that's for sure. Happened on the morning of the 2010 general election when he was campaigning. He was in a small plane towing a UKIP banner when it crashed.
What caused the crash? Was it pilot error or was someone trying to take him out?
The official investigation blamed the banner, which got caught in the tailplane and forced the nose down. But get this, the pilot was later charged with threatening to kill Farage.
What the fuck? Sounds like a right nutter.
The pilot was clearly troubled. He was found guilty, but given a community order. Sadly, he died a few years later.
Damn, that's a whole other story right there. But let's get back to Farage. He was seriously injured in the crash, right?
Yeah, he broke his sternum, ribs, and punctured a lung. He said he still suffers from back pain because of it.
So the bloke's a walking miracle, having survived a car accident and a plane crash? I bet he's got a few stories to tell.
He does. In fact, he's written a couple of books, an autobiography called Fighting Bull, and a memoir about the Brexit campaign called The Purple Revolution.
Purple Revolution. Is that some kind of UKIP thing?
Yeah, it's a reference to the party's color.
Right, of course.
Right.
So besides writing books and causing chaos, what else does Farage get up to in his spare time? Surely he must have some hobbies, right?
Well, he's a big cricket fan and loves to go fishing. He's also known to enjoy a pint or two of beer, which has become part of his public image.
So he's a man of the people then.
He tries to cultivate that image, but he's also a member of the East India Club, which is a pretty exclusive gentlemen's club in London.
So he's a bit of a contradiction then. A man of the people who also hangs out with the elite.
He's a complex character, that's for sure. But one thing's for certain. He knows how to make headlines.
He's a master of the media. That's undeniable. So what's the latest with Farage? What's he been up to in Parliament?
Well, one of the most recent things he's been involved in is the debate over Elon Musk's potential donation to Reform UK.
Elon Musk, the Tesla guy? What the hell is he doing getting involved in British politics?
Apparently, Musk and Farage have a bit of a bromance going on. They share similar views on things like Brexit and climate change.
I bet that's got the Labour Party shitting themselves.
It's certainly raised some eyebrows. $100 million is a lot of money to throw around in an election campaign.
That's for sure. So what's the deal with this donation? Is it even legal?
It's a bit of a gray area. There are rules about foreign donations to political parties, but it's not clear whether Musk's money would fall foul of them.
I bet Farage is loving this. More controversy, more attention. It's all grist to his mill.
He thrives on it. He's always been a divisive figure, but he doesn't seem to care. He's got his supporters, and that's all that matters to him.
I guess that's the mark of a true politician, right? Not caring what anyone thinks as long as you get your way.
There's certainly an element of that to Farage's personality. He's very single-minded and determined.
So what's next for Farage? Is he going to ride this wave of controversy all the way to 10 Downing Street?
It's too early to say, but one thing's for sure. He's not going to disappear quietly.
I wouldn't expect anything less from the man who brought Brexit to Britain. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from Farage's early days as a metal trader to his current status as an MP with a potential billionaire backer. But there's one thing I'm still curious about. His broadcasting career. Didn't he do some TV work?
You're right. He's had quite a career in broadcasting, actually.
All right, spill the beans. What shows has he been on?
Well, after he stepped down as UKIP leader, he landed a gig as a commentator on Fox News in the U.S.
Fox News, the channel that's basically Trump's personal propaganda machine.
That's the one. Farage was a regular fixture on their shows for a while, offering his take on Brexit and all sorts of other things.
I bet he loved that, being on TV, spouting his opinions to millions of viewers.
He seemed to enjoy it. He's a natural performer, and he's always been good at getting his message across.
So what else has he done on TV? Anything besides Fox News?
Yeah, he's also worked for some British channels. He had his own show on LBC Radio for a few years, and then he moved to GB News, which is a new right-leaning channel.
GB News, the one that's been having all sorts of problems with viewers and advertisers.
That's right. But Farage seems to be doing all right there. He's one of their most popular presenters.
I guess there's an audience for his brand of politics, even if it's not everyone's cup of tea. So what kind of show does he have on GB News?
It's a nightly opinion show where he discusses current affairs and interviews guests.
Sounds like the perfect platform for him to continue stirring the pot. But wait a minute, I'm seeing something about him being on a reality TV show, is that right?
You're not imagining things. He was a contestant on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here in 2023.
What the fuck? Nigel Farage eating bugs and doing challenges in the jungle? That's hilarious.
It was quite a surreal sight. Apparently, they offered him a huge sum of money to appear on the show.
I bet he couldn't resist. More attention, more money. It's a win-win for Farage.
He certainly knows how to play the game. And he didn't do too badly on the show either. He finished in third place.
Third place? I'm surprised he didn't win the whole thing. I bet he charmed the socks off the viewers with his cheeky chappy persona.
He's got a certain charisma, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But not everyone was happy about him being on the show. Some people felt it was normalizing his brand of politics.
I can see their point. Giving him a platform on a popular family show is bound to make him more likable, even to people who disagree with his views.
It's a tricky issue. On the one hand, it's just entertainment and he's free to do whatever he wants. On the other hand, it does give him a chance to reach a wider audience and potentially soften his image.
So it's a double-edged sword. But let's be honest. The bloke's a master of self-promotion. He knows how to use the media to his advantage.
He's certainly not naive when it comes to the media. He's been playing the game for years, and he's very good at it.
All right, that seems like a good place to wrap up part one. Stick around, we'll dig deeper into this wanker's political views and his bromance with Trump in part two.
All right, so last time we left off with Farage dipping his toes into the cesspool of reality TV. Now let's wade deeper into the swamp of his political beliefs.
Hold your nose, folks. This is where it gets smelly. So tell me, what exactly does Farage believe in, besides himself? Is it all just about Brexit, or is there more to it?
Well, Brexit was his main platform for years, but his ideology goes beyond just leaving the EU. He's a right-wing populist, which basically means he appeals to the common man and claims to represent the interests of the ordinary people against the elites.
So he's like the British version of Trump, then?
There are definitely some similarities. They both share a disdain for the establishment, a knack for stirring up controversy, and a talent for connecting with people who feel left behind by globalization and social change.
Right, so they both love a good us versus them narrative. But what are Farage's specific policies? What does he actually want to do with Britain?
His main priorities have always been reducing immigration, cutting taxes, and shrinking the size of government. He's also a social conservative, opposing things like same-sex marriage and gun control.
So he's basically a throwback to the Thatcher era.
There's definitely a strong Thatcherite influence in his thinking. He admires her strong leadership and her free market policies.
But didn't Thatcher actually support Britain being in the EU?
She did initially, but she later became more skeptical of the EU's direction, and Farage often quotes her later speeches to justify his own Euroscepticism.
Clever tactic, using the Iron Lady's words against her own legacy. But let's talk about immigration. Farage has made a career out of bashing immigrants, hasn't he?
He's certainly made it a central theme of his political rhetoric. He argues that immigration has put a strain on public services, depressed wages, and eroded British culture.
But isn't immigration good for the economy? I mean, don't immigrants do a lot of the jobs that Brits don't want to do?
That's a complex issue, and there's no easy answer. There's evidence to support both sides of the argument. Farage tends to focus on the negative aspects of immigration, playing on people's fears and anxieties.
So he's a master of the dog whistle, then, saying things that appeal to prejudice without explicitly endorsing it.
He's certainly walked a fine line at times. He's been accused of racism and xenophobia, but he's always denied those accusations.
Of course he has. Politicians never admit to being bigots, even when their words and actions suggest otherwise. But let's move on to his economic policies. Cutting taxes, shrinking the government sounds like standard right-wing fare to me.
It is. He believes in free markets, limited government intervention, and individual responsibility. He argues that lower taxes will stimulate economic growth and that a smaller state will be more efficient and less burdensome on taxpayers.
Right, so less money for the NHS, less support for the poor, more money for the rich. It's the same old Tory playbook.
His critics would say that's exactly what he's proposing. They argue that his policies would benefit the wealthy at the expense of the poor and vulnerable.
So he's basically Robin Hood in reverse, robbing from the poor to give to the rich.
That's a bit of a simplification, but it's certainly a line of attack that his opponents have used effectively.
Fair enough. But let's not forget that he's actually managed to get a lot of ordinary Brits to support his ideas. So he must be doing something right, wouldn't you say?
He's definitely tapped into a vein of discontent in British society. Many people feel ignored by the political establishment and believe that Farage is the only one speaking for them.
So he's the voice of the voiceless, then?
That's how he presents himself. Whether that's accurate or not is up for debate.
All right, let's switch gears a bit and talk about his relationship with Donald Trump. They seem to be thick as thieves, don't they?
They've certainly got a lot in common. They're both right-wing populists who share a disdain for the establishment and a talent for stirring up controversy.
Birds of a feather flock together, as they say. But when did their bromance actually begin? Did they meet before or after Trump became president?
They first met in 2016 during the U.S. presidential election campaign. Farage was actually invited to speak at one of Trump's rallies.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
A British politician speaking at an American election rally. That's mental.
It was a pretty unusual move, but Farage and Trump hit it off, and they've been close ever since.
I bet they spent most of their time bitching about the fake news media and the globalist elites.
They've certainly been critical of those groups, but their relationship goes beyond just shared grievances. Farage has been a vocal supporter of Trump's policies, particularly on issues like trade and immigration.
Right, so Farage is basically Trump's cheerleader in Britain.
He's certainly one of Trump's most high-profile supporters in the UK. He's even appeared on Fox News to defend Trump's actions on numerous occasions.
I bet that went down well with the Brits.
Yeah.
Not.
Farage's support for Trump has certainly alienated some of his former supporters, but he's never been afraid to go against the grain, even if it means losing friends along the way.
He's a true maverick, that's for sure. But let's talk about his vision for the future of Britain. What does he want the country to look like post-Brexit?
He's spoken about wanting Britain to become a global Britain, forging new trade deals around the world, and reasserting its independence on the international stage.
Right, so no more being tied to those pesky Europeans. But what about his domestic agenda? What does he want to do with the British economy and society?
He's still pushing for lower taxes, less regulation, and tighter controls on immigration. He believes that these policies will make Britain more competitive and prosperous.
But haven't things actually gotten worse since Brexit? I mean, hasn't the economy taken a hit?
It's been a mixed bag, really. There have been some negative consequences of Brexit, like higher prices and supply chain disruptions. But there have also been some positive developments, like the ability to strike new trade deals.
So it's too early to say whether Brexit has been a success or a failure.
Exactly. It's going to take years, maybe even decades, to fully assess the impact of Brexit on Britain.
All right, fair enough. But what about Farage's vision for British society? Does he want to turn back the clock to the good old days of empire, or is he looking to the future?
He's definitely nostalgic for a time when Britain was a more powerful and influential nation. But he's also aware that the world has changed and that Britain needs to adapt to new realities.
So he's a bit of a traditionalist with a modern twist.
You could say that. He wants to preserve what he sees as the best of British culture and values while also embracing the opportunities of globalization.
Sounds like a bit of a balancing act. But isn't that what politics is all about? Trying to find a compromise between competing interests and ideologies.
It is, and Farage has been one of the most successful politicians in recent years at navigating those complexities.
All right, so we've covered Farage's political beliefs, his bromance with Trump, and his vision for Britain. But there's one more thing I want to touch on before we wrap up this part. His legacy. How will history remember Nigel Farage?
That's a tough question. He's a polarizing figure who has been both praised and vilified. His supporters see him as a champion of the people, a brave voice who stood up for what he believed in, even when it was unpopular.
Right, the man who gave a voice to the silent majority. But what about his critics? How do they see him?
They see him as a divisive demagogue who exploited people's fears and prejudices for his own political gain. They argue that he's damaged Britain's reputation abroad and sown discord at home.
So he's either a hero or a villain, depending on your perspective.
Pretty much. It's too early to say definitively how history will judge him. But one thing's for sure, he'll be remembered as one of the most significant figures in British politics of the early 21st century.
All right, that seems like a good place to wrap up part 2. Stick around. We'll delve into this fucker's personal life, his broadcasting work, and even his penchant for getting things thrown at him in part 3. All right, you stuck with us through the political bullshit and the Trump love fest. Now for the grand finale. Let's peel back the last layers of this onion and see what really makes Nigel Farage tick. Is there more to this bloke than meets the eye?
There's always more than meets the eye, especially with someone like Farage. He's carefully crafted a public persona, the man of the people, a pint-drinking patriot. But there's a whole lot more to him than that.
All right, let's dissect this image. The man of the people bit, is that genuine or is it just a load of bollocks?
Well, he's definitely got a knack for connecting with people who feel ignored by the political establishment. He's got this bloke down the pub charm that makes him seem relatable, even if his politics are divisive.
Right, so he's good at playing the ordinary bloke card, even though he went to a posh private school and made a fortune as a trader.
He's certainly not your typical working class lad. But he's managed to convince a lot of people that he's one of them, fighting for their interests against the elites.
It's a classic populist tactic, isn't it? Pretending to be an outsider while you're actually playing the game better than anyone else. But what about the pint-drinking patriots image? Is that just for show, or does he actually love his warm beer in England that much?
Well, he's definitely
come on.
cultivated that image over the years, posing for photos in pubs with a pint in hand, talking about British values and traditions. It's all part of his brand.
And it works, doesn't it? It makes him seem like a regular bloke who just happens to be passionate about his country. But isn't there a bit of hypocrisy there? I mean, he's married to a German woman, isn't he?
He is, and that's something that his critics have often pointed out. They argue that his patriotism is selective and that he's happy to benefit from globalization when it suits him.
So he's a bit of a hypocrite then, talking about putting Britain first while he's got his own little slice of Europe at home.
He's certainly not always consistent in his actions and his words, but that's politics, isn't it? Saying one thing and doing another.
Sadly, it often is. But let's move on from the image and talk about the man himself.
Oh.
What kind of bloke is Farage behind the scenes? Is he as loud and opinionated in private as he is in public?
From what I've read, he can be quite charming and witty in person. He's got a good sense of humor and loves to tell stories, but he's also known to be quite stubborn and quick to anger.
Sounds like a right laugh at a party.
Yeah.
But what about his personal quirks? Surely he must have some, right?
Well, he's a bit of a fashion icon, known for his sharp suits and his love of pinstripe. He's also got a rather distinctive voice, which has been both praised and mocked.
Yeah, that voice. It's like nails on a chalkboard to some people, but others find it quite soothing. I guess it's another love him or hate him thing. But what about his rise to fame? How did he go from being a nobody to one of the most recognizable faces in British politics?
It was a gradual process, really.
Mm-hmm.
He started out as a backbencher in the European Parliament, but slowly gained notoriety for his outspoken views and his willingness to challenge the establishment.
Right, so he made a name for himself by being a bit of a shit stirrer.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked, didn't it? He got people talking about him, whether they agreed with him or not.
Exactly. He realized early on that controversy sells, and he wasn't afraid to create it. He was also very good at using the media to his advantage, getting his message out there and building his profile.
He's a master of self-promotion, that's for sure. But let's talk about the flip side of fame, the hate. Farage has attracted his fair share of it over the years, hasn't he?
He has, yeah. He's been a target of protests, abuse, and even violence. He's had milkshakes thrown at him, his car has been vandalized, and he's received death threats.
Damn. Sounds like being Nigel Farage is a dangerous business.
Mm-hmm.
Why do people hate him so much? Is it just because of his politics, or is there something more to it?
It's partly because of his politics, of course. He's taken some very controversial stances on issues like immigration and the EU, which have alienated a lot of people. But there's also something about his personality that rubs people up the wrong way.
Right, so it's not just what he says, but how he says it. He's got that smug, self-satisfied smirk that makes you want to punch him in the face, even if you agree with him.
He's definitely got a knack for provoking people. And he seems to enjoy it, too.
All right, we touched on his broadcasting career in part one. Is there anything else to add?
Well, he's had quite a diverse career in broadcasting, from political commentary on Fox News and GB News to a stint on the reality show of, "I'm a celebrity, get me out of here."
Wait, he was on I'm a Celebrity. I can't even picture this bloke eating bugs in the jungle.
It was quite a sight to see. Some argue it was a calculated move to soften his image and reach a wider audience.
So he's not just a political animal, he's a media-savvy entertainer as well. All right, so we've covered Farage's public persona, his private life, his rise to fame, and his knack for attracting both love and hate. Any final thoughts on this divisive bloke before we wrap things up?
Nigel Farage is a complex and contradictory figure who defies easy categorization. He's a brilliant communicator, a shrewd politician, and a master manipulator of the media. He's also a polarizing figure who has deeply divided British society. Love him or hate him, you can't deny that he's had a profound impact on British politics.
Well said, Nigel Farage. The man who brought Brexit to Britain, the friend of Donald Trump, the milkshake magnate, the pint-drinking patriot, the posh bloke who pretends to be a man of the people. He's all of these things and more. And whether you see him as a hero or a villain, one thing's for sure, he's not going away anytime soon. So there you have it, folks. The deep dive into the shitstorm that is Nigel Farage. He's a complex character, a controversial figure, and a force to be reckoned with. Love him or hate him, you can't deny that he's made his mark on British politics. Now go do your own damn research. That's what Google's for. Catch you on the flip side.